Good morning. This is a hearing before the Licensing Board for the City of Boston. Today is July 7th, 2020. As a reminder, please mute yourself unless you are speaking or responding to a question presented by the board. Please note that this hearing is being conducted pursuant to Governor Baker's emergency order temporarily amending certain provisions of the open meeting law. This is what allows us to meet virtually. This hearing is being recorded and will be posted to the City of Boston's website. Attorney Bletzer, can you hear us? Attorney Bletzer? I believe it says connecting to audio.
Who's the iPhone?
We have an individual on an iPhone.
Leslie and Kathleen, it's Maureen.
Oh, hi, Maureen. Okay.
Just send an email to. Attorney Bletzer, can you hear us now?
Oh, I can now. Yeah, I got you. Thanks. I just set a phone in. Sorry.
Not a problem. And are you with me?
Yes. Yeah, Tom's here.
Okay, great. I'm going to read this into the record and then I will swear everyone in virtually. Today's hearing is regarding Tom English's Cottage, Inc., at 112 Emerson Street, manager Thomas English. Date of the incident is March 21st, 2020. Incident number 023826. Service of alcohol during prohibition of on-premise consumption pursuant to Governor Charles Baker's executive order and the board's advisory dated March 23rd, 2020. Copies of all relevant notices and reports are attached here too. Any individuals who wish to testify today, please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
I do.
Sergeant and Detective, you can read the record into the report into the record.
Okay, Sergeant Detective William Gallagher, Boston Police Licensed Premise Unit. This morning I'll be reading from a Boston Police incident report that I wrote. On 3/21/2020 at about 4:15 p.m., Sergeant Detective William Gallagher, Detective Eddie Hernandez, assigned to the Licensed Premise Unit, were in South Boston, monitoring the bars and restaurants during the COVID-19 emergency when they arrived at Tom English's cottage at 112 Emerson Street. Detectives had been made aware through the mayor's office that there had been complaints that the premise was not abiding by the governor's and Boston Licensing Board advisory prohibiting the sale and consumption of food and alcohol inside a licensed premise. Detectives parked their unmarked car, proceeded to the front door on foot, finding the door locked, but hearing voices inside. Detectives looked in the front windows and could see individuals sitting at the bar in the rear of the premise. Detectives knocked and announced their presence. After several minutes, detectives were let in by the owner, Thomas English. Inside the premise, detectives saw multiple bottles of open beer and a bottle of Jameson whiskey on the bar where the individuals were observed. Detectives spoke with Mr. English about the advisory and service of alcohol. Mr. English stated that he was sorry and would not do it again. In addition to Mr. English, there was another male and a female who was identified as Mr. English's daughter. As a result of what detectives had observed, Sergeant Detective Gallagher issued a licensed premise inspection notice number 023826 at Tom English's cottage for the service of alcohol during the Governor and Boston Licensing Board advisory during the COVID-19 emergency. Service of alcoholic beverages or food for on-premise consumption is forbidden. Mr. Thomas English signed for and accepted the notice. Detectives informed Mr. English that he must vacate the premise. In addition, detectives were instructed by the Boston Licensing Board to seize Tom English's common victual license LB 99065. The license was turned over to the licensing board. I believe we do have a picture that Detective Hernandez did take. I'm not sure how it's gonna come out on, you can see the bar, you can see bottles of alcohol, a bottle of Jameson. That's the first picture. And here's a second picture. See Mr. English, more alcohol in the bar. Third picture. Also of open bottles of alcohol in the bar. Those essentially are the facts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Attorney Blitzer?
Yes, thank you. Sergeant Detective Gallagher, you said that the doors were locked when you showed up, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And all the chairs were up on the tables inside the establishment?
Not in the rear where they were sitting, but yes, most of them were up.
Okay. And the only people in here were these three individuals, correct?
That's correct.
If I may be heard from the board?
I'm sorry, what was
Can you
that?
hear me? Can you guys hear me okay? I'm sorry. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I just couldn't hear. Did you ask something of the board? I couldn't hear the last part.
No, I just said I wanted to be heard by the board
Okay,
at this point.
yep, go ahead.
So, obviously, we understand the whole crisis that we're all going through. And at this point, on the March 21st date, we were kind of in that flux period. The area police had come to the establishment 2 days before that on the 19th. And there was no violation because Mr. English was in paying bills and paying off, at the time when everybody had closed on the 13th, 14th, and 15th, everybody thought it was going to be a 2-week process. People were going in to take care of their properties, do what they needed to do in terms of figuring out where they were going from here. But from a technical standpoint, having people in the establishment was not the problem. The issue was the alcohol that was being consumed at the time. And up until the governor's order that came out on March 23rd, which was 2 days later, there wasn't a specific edict from anybody regarding, an owner sitting in having a beer while he's doing work on his property. What Mr. English had been doing is being in his property, and he still goes in every day to check it. He owns the property, so he has to make sure the property is safe. He has to make sure that there are no issues with the equipment. He did have an ice malfunction which caused him a problem. But on the 19th, when he was in the building, the grate outside had fallen. So he was back in there on the 20th and the 21st fixing the grate. Actually, Mr. Flaherty, who was in there with him, was a worker that he had hired to come in and do some work on the grate and also do some work inside the bar. He's been trying to fix the place up for a potential sale that he has. So he was in the place, but obviously everybody's been going through a tough time, and I would suggest to the board that this was early in the whole COVID transactional issue for the restaurants and bars as to what can and cannot be done. He wasn't running a business in there. It was closed. The doors were locked. Sergeant Detective Gallagher and Detective Hernandez had to bang on the doors to get in. It wasn't an unusual issue for him because people were coming by in the early days, banging on the door all the time to find out what's going on. When are they going to reopen? When can we, come back in? All that type of stuff. So obviously, he apologizes for not letting them in right away, but that was part of the reason for not having opened the door immediately at that point. He made no attempt to hide any of the beer he was drinking on the bar. He and Mr. Flaherty did have beer and were drinking a beer after doing some work at the property. The daughter had come to pick them up and take them home. But I would suggest to the board that, this was early in this. Obviously, it was the first week of the COVID-19 crisis. And for an owner, and we all talked about it because we've had the calls on the board about informing our clients, make sure they understand that they can't be in there serving alcohol. but at the same time made it perfectly clear, and certainly the March 23rd order made it perfectly clear to everybody that owners and employees are not allowed to sit in and drink a beer. And even if you're doing your takeout, that you're not going to be able to serve alcohol to your employees. They can eat, but they cannot drink the alcohol. So his license, obviously, you took his license. The license was taken back on March 21st. It's been 4 months that he's been out of business. He has not had the opportunity to reopen, to do anything at this point. I would suggest to the board that as a result of this being such an early violation of the order and what was happening at the time, and there was not as much clarity as there was certainly after the 23rd and going forward from there, that you know, the consequences and the penalties that have been issued to him technically already should suffice, hopefully, to the board's liking at this point. He had no further issues after that, shut the place down, has had no other problems with it since then, has done some work inside, but really nothing of any sort since then.
Okay, is there anything else you would like to say on the record?
No.
Okay, I just have a couple of questions for either you or your client, Mr. English. When the district police officers stopped by to tell you that you should be shut down, did they tell you that you couldn't be drinking on the premise, Mr. English?
Which police officers?
On the 19th when they came in.
On the 19th?
Yeah.
I don't believe so. I don't think we were having beers on the 19th at all. I think I was just paying bills.
Okay. So are you saying that you were confused about whether or not owners could consume alcohol on the premise during the COVID emergency?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Did you receive our advisories? I think they're pretty
How would I
clear.
receive-
Well, I
Email,
think you're right. I
posted
think
on our
it's-
website.
I think the 23rd made it perfectly clear. I just don't think up until the 23rd order came out. that
Well,
was
when it says
perfectly
no
clear.
on-premise, when it says no on-premise consumption, it means both by staff and by consumers. And you're stating that you were there working, and so I don't understand why there were employees, including yourself, drinking while they were working. This is a very, I have a lot of sympathy for what's going on with the bars and restaurants right now. Trust me, I do. Our first, the first thing we do is try to educate people about what's going on. And if there are any questions, you should be contacting the board. But ignorance of the law is not an excuse. We've been pretty clear, we've been pretty flexible, so you should have reached out to us. I understand you have been shut down for 4 months. I understand you want to reopen, but what was described to me and what was written in the police report is definitely not acceptable. It's actually egregious. That's why we pulled your license that day. And do you plan on reopening should your license be returned to you? And how will you be reopening? Are you going to serve food?
Yes, we've got a full kitchen. We're ready to go with food. We wouldn't open for a couple of weeks anyways, because we need to make sure we clean it, make sure we've got the appropriate cleaning methods to make sure that we'll do what we're supposed to do.
Okay. I know this was early on, but I don't think that's an excuse for not understanding what was required of you from the board and from the city and from the state. Do any of the other commissioners have any questions?
None at this time, thanks.
Neither do I, thank you.
And I just want to add, every single time our officers had to go into an establishment to check to see if people were in compliance with COVID, they put their own lives at risk. And that's something that the board takes seriously.
I understand that. I understand that fully.
Okay, Sergeant or Detective, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, ma'am.
If there are no more questions from the chair or the commissioner, the board will take this under advisement and we'll vote on this matter on Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.